to stall this bill won't succeed, they will adjust and correct themselves, not just on currency, Madam President, but on all the other areas where they don't treat us fairly. So this is an important vote and an important day for America, and I yield the floor. Madam President?
Senator from New York.
I have 8 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection. The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close debate on S-1619, a bill to provide for identification of misaligned currency, require action to correct the misalignment, and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators.
By unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that debate on S-1619, a bill to provide for identification of misaligned currency, require action to correct the misalignment, and for other purposes, shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander, Ms. Ayotte, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Baucus, Mr. Bekich, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Bingaman, Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Blunt, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Boxer, Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, Mr. Brown of Ohio. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Cochran. Ms. Collins. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Coons. Mr. Corker. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Dement. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Enzi. Mrs. Feinstein. Mr. Franken. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mrs. Hagan. Who's on first? Mr. Harkin. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Heller. Mr. Hoeven. Mrs. Hutchison. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Noway. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Mr. Kerry. Mr. Kirk. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Cole. Mr. Kyle. Ms. Landrieu. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Lee. Mr. Levin. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Manchin. Mr. McCain. Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, Mr. Nelson of Florida, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, Mr. Reed of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen,
Aye.
Mr. Shelby, Ms. Snow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative: Brown of Massachusetts, Brown of Ohio, Coons, Durbin, Graham, Isaacson, Manchin, Pryor, Schumer, and Shaheen. Senators voting in the negative: Alexander, Hutchison, Kyle, McConnell, and Roberts. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Mr. Menendez, aye. Mr. Joe Hans, no. Mr. Akaka, aye. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Harkin, aye. It's not a fire you can put out. Mr. Blunt, no. Mr. Beckich, aye. Mr. Webb. Mr. Webb, aye. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, no. Mr. Franken, aye. Mr. Reed of Nevada, aye. Mr. Tester, aye. Mr. Wicker, no. Mrs. Murray, no. Mr. Rockefeller, aye. Mr. Carper, aye. Ms. Collins, aye. Mr. Blumenthal, aye. Mr. Coburn, no. Mr. Bennett, aye. Mr. Warner, aye. Mr. Rubio, no. Mr. Heller, no. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coates, no. Ms. Ayotte? Ms. Ayotte, no. Mr. Lee? Mr. Lee, no. Mr. Moran, no. Mr. Hatch, no. Ms. Snow. Ms. Snow, aye. Mr. Corker? No. Ms. Stabenow? Ms. Stabenow? Aye. Mrs. Boxer? Aye. Mr. Cornyn? No. Mr. Barrasso? No. Mr. Vitter? Mr. Vitter? No. Mr. Inhofe? Mr. Inhofe? No. Mr. Leahy? Mr. Leahy? Aye. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole? Aye. Ms. Lugar? Mr. Lugar? No. Ms. Cantwell? No. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota? Aye. Mr. Nelson? Mr. Nelson, Nebraska? Aye. Ms. Landrieu? Aye.
Sending about intersection continues.
Mr. Casey? Mr. Casey? Aye. Mr. Whitehouse? Aye. Mr. Cardin? Aye. Mr. Sanders? Aye. Mr. Noe? Aye. Mr. Nelson? Mr. Nelson of Florida? Aye. Mr. Bingaman? Aye. Ms. Mikulski? Ms. Mikulski? Aye. Mr. Cochran? Mr. Cochran? Aye. Mr. Kirk? No. Mrs. Gillibrand? Aye. Mr. Chambliss? Mr. Chambliss? Aye. Mr. Merkley? Mr. Merkley? Aye. Mr. Shelby? Aye. Mr. Risch? No. Mr. Udall of New Mexico? Aye. Mr. Crapo? Mr. Crapo, no. Mr. Burr, aye. Mr. McCain. Mr. McCain, no. Mrs. Hagan, aye. Mr. Carey. Mr. Carey, aye. Ms. Murkowski, no. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Wyden, aye. Mr. Levin, aye. Mr. Paul, no. Mr. Udall of Colorado, aye. Mr. Dement, no. Mr. Thune, no. Mr. Enzi, no. Mr. Bozeman, no. Mr. Grassley, no. Mr. Lautenberg, aye. Mr. Toomey, no. Mrs. Feinstein? Mrs. Feinstein, aye. Mr. Sessions, aye. Mr. Baucus, aye. Mrs. McCaskill, no. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, aye. Mr. Conrad, aye. Mr. Lieberman, aye. Aye. Mr. Portman, aye. Mr. Hoven, aye.
On this vote, anyone wish?
On this vote, the yeas are 62, the nays are 38. 3/5 of the Senate duly chosen and sworn, having voted in the affirmative, the motion is agreed to.
Mr. President,
The majority leader is
would we
recognized.
consider and also lay this matter on the table?
In order.
Note the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. Alexander.
President,
The majority leader is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent to call the quorum be terminated.
Without objection, so ordered. The Senate will please come to order. The majority leader is recognized.
Mr. President, if we could have the attention of the Senate. We're now 30 hours post-cloture. The Republican leader and I, what we would like to do, there's, of course, with what has happened procedurally, there is no opportunity to offer amendments unless we agree to offer amendments, except for the issue dealing with suspending the rules. What we would like to do is have senators work to come up with some amendments that they feel should be offered, and we'll all be happy, Senator McConnell's happy, to see if we can work our way through this. So I would hope that senators would check with floor staff and see how we can get this done. It would be to my liking to not have to spill over into tomorrow. The highest holy day of the Jewish faith is tomorrow starting at sundown. There are a number of people who wish to leave to be able to be home with their families on that day, but we have to finish this legislation this week. I would like to do it today, if we can. People should have an opportunity to offer amendments, give a little speech, big speech, whatever they feel is appropriate, and we can vote. And I'm happy to do that. I've called off the quorum. People are going to talk. And in the meantime, floor staff will be waiting to hear from you as to what we can do regarding amendments.
Mr. President, I would only...
Leaders recognized.
Mr. President, I would only add that the practical effect of where we are, not having been allowed to offer any amendments during the consideration of this bill, is that we are left with motions to suspend. And as the majority leader indicated, we're going to have some discussions about how many motions to suspend the majority will, shall I say, tolerate. The bad part of all of this from the Senate's point of view as an institution is the minority is put at a substantial disadvantage. Having said that, as Majority Leader indicated, floor staff are going to work together and see if we can come up with some list of motions to instruct that will at least allow the minority to have some voice in the course of the consideration of this piece of legislation.
Mr. President.
With the majority leaders recognized.
There are a number, excuse me. Excuse me. There are a number of things we could do. We can do the motions to suspend. We're happy on this side to have, with consent, just do amendments. That's fine over here. I would say, and I don't want to get in a long debate here, I've been in a situation, Mr. President, during the entire pendency of this legislation to have amendments allowed. I said that yesterday. I have no problem with that. The problem we had is that the Republican leader offered the President's jobs bill in a form that is not the President's jobs bill. Now, I've told him this morning, you want to vote on that? Fine, we'll do that. We'll have a vote on that today. It can either be a motion to suspend the rules, or it can be a regular amendment. I feel that way about all the motions to suspend that have been filed. So there are times when I accept the blame of not allowing amendments. There are times that that's certainly, I'm willing to take that burden of being criticized, but not on this one. Not on this one. I said publicly, I said privately to different senators, Democrats and Republicans, that amendments could be offered. I don't want to get in a long debate about that, but that in
Friend, you just yield for a question. I listen very carefully to what the majority leader says. We interact every day. And what my good friend has just said, he'd be more than happy to have amendments, and he gets to pick. He gets to pick what amendments we get to offer. That is not, I would say to my good friend, the view of the minority as to how we ought to operate. That we ought to be able to determine what amendments we're going to offer, not my good friend, the majority leader. So what he's saying, in effect, is yes, he would have been prepared to allow us to offer amendments, but he would select which of our amendments might be appropriate. And that is not, I think, a place that the minority, no matter which party is in the minority, would like to find itself.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Excuse me. We have tried to set up a system here that's fair. Now, fair is in the mind of the person that says fair, and I understand that. But we've had an open amendment process here, and that has led, because of the intransigence of the Republicans, into getting nothing done. Nothing done. Offer an amendment, there's no way to get rid of that thing. So the system that we had on this bill may not be the best in the world, but under what has been going on in the Senate, sometimes we do the best we can with the tools we have. And there was no way of managing this legislation other than how I've just described. People can imagine what this place would have been like had we had a simple, anybody can offer anything they want. Get the troops out of Afghanistan, and on with all the many things that people would and have done in this legislation. So without he said, she said, or I guess in this instance, he said, I think what we should do is try to finish this legislation today. The motion to suspend has been filed. That's fine with us. Let's try to work through as many of those as we can and see if we can finish this today. Otherwise, we'll finish it tomorrow. 30 hours.
I would
The
only
Republican leaders recognized.
I would only add the way the Senate used to work was the majority didn't pick the amendments that the minority chose to offer, but there was some ability to determine whether or not it got a vote, because any senator could prevent a time agreement on the opportunity to get a vote on an amendment. So it wasn't totally freewheeling. And then at some point, if 60 members of the Senate felt we ought to move to conclusion, we would. A much more orderly and open process leading to the same result, which is that if 60 members of the Senate want to end a matter and bring it to a conclusion, they can. So my complaint is about what we do before we get to the 60 votes, which I think is, in this particular instance, unfair to the minority. Now, my party was divided on this issue. Some members were for it, some members were against it. That meant for sure that at some point, 60 votes were going to be achieved, and it was going to pass. The problem, I would say to my good friend, is what we did before then, which has the practical effect of putting the minority in a position where it gets no amendments at all, or is once again at the sufferance of the majority in motions to suspend at the end, in which we're basically, the majority determines how many we get, and all of that. I mean, this level of control is really not necessary, in my judgment, in order to make the Senate move forward, because I will say again before I yield the floor, if 60 senators are in favor of bringing a matter to conclusion, it will be brought to conclusion. That's what just happened a few minutes ago. So I hope we can move forward in a more orderly process in the future, and maybe we can work out some agreement to have motions to suspend here this afternoon that will not require us to be here tomorrow.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
The Republican leader and I came here at about the same time. I remember the good old days, too. But everyone knows that follows government at all, that during the last Congress and part of this one, the #1 goal of the Republicans have been to stop legislation from moving through here. Look what's happened this year. And they've been fairly successful doing that, I have to acknowledge. And I have said publicly, and I say here today, I admire my friend, the Republican leader, because he was very candid with what his goal is in this Congress, to make sure that President Obama is not reelected. That's been their goal. And as a result of that, legislation has been very slow moving. And we have not been able to legislate as we did in the good old days. So let's now try, with the situation we find ourselves in, to work through this on a bipartisan basis. This is a good piece of legislation. Let's see if we can get through these amendments. I'm confident we can. We have two outstanding floor managers for both Senator McConnell and for me, Gary Mai and David Schappa, they do great work. They're going to try to sift through all this stuff and put us on a pathway that they can show to Senator McConnell and I that they think will work, and if it looks good, McConnell and I will agree, and we'll get out of here today. Otherwise, we'll do it tomorrow.
Mr. President, just one more observation. My good friend referred to the good old days. The good old days weren't that long ago. They weren't that long ago. I can remember just a few years ago when my party was in the majority in this body, and I was the assistant leader, making the point with great repetition and listening to a lot of grumbling that the price for being in the majority is you have to take bad votes. You have to take votes you don't like in order to get legislation across the floor and get it finished. So this is not ancient times we're talking about where the minority actually got votes, took votes, and were not shut out. And I hope we can move back in that direction. I think it would be a lot better for the United States Senate.
Mr. President, I'm not going to argue with my friend. The record speaks for itself. We know what's happened, and I repeat, we're where we are today. And that's what we have to do to move forward on this most important legislation. And I'll do my best to cooperate and allow the senators to have votes on issues they feel are important.
Cloture having been invoked, the motion to recommit and amendments thereto fall as being inconsistent with cloture. Senator from Connecticut. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Yes.
Move to vacate the quorum call.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, like many of my colleagues, we were just back home last week and talking, in my case, to Alaskans, and all the issues that were on their mind were pretty simple: the economy and jobs. Alaska has fared better than most states over the last 2 years, but no matter where I go, maybe a small convenience store while I'm driving around town, or Home Depot, the gas station, or wherever I may get a chance to engage with Alaskans, people are concerned about the economy and the ability for our jobs to be created in this great country of ours. Alaskans have known that the economy will take some time to turn around. That's why today I'm pleased to talk about a little bit about the Jobs Act before us this week. And hopefully, as we move forward, we'll spend some time on the debate on how important this work will be. Last week, when I was in Alaska, I had the Transportation Secretary LaHood in Alaska. We had a chance to travel around and get a good sense on what is important to Alaska with regards to ports and roads and airports. The core infrastructure of our state is no different than any other state. It's critical that we repair, put into shape some of the facilities that are falling apart, or in some cases expanding them. The Jobs Act alone would add in Alaska $200 million to repair Alaska's transportation network. As you can imagine, that $200 million would be spent with the private sector, construction companies, contractors, hiring private individuals, workers to work on those jobs, good paying jobs to provide good incomes for their families. The same is true in that same piece of legislation, the Jobs Act that's in front of us, that it would offer for Alaska around $62 million for school construction, which again, as you travel around my state, and I'm sure like any other state, the need for improvements and expansion to the schools, that some have been there for many, many years and have not had the renovations necessary. Again, providing hundreds and hundreds of jobs. The Jobs Act also has some good steps to deal with small businesses, how to ensure that they get a break off of their taxes, to ensure that they have a benefit as we try to move this economy forward, and the tax provisions, the payroll tax reduction, which would affect 20,000 Alaskan businesses in a positive way, reducing their tax burden. Or the working families that would see a reduction in their payroll taxes. On an average, for a middle-class family, would be almost $2,000, and not a bad gift in a sense as we move into this holiday season, but it's really their money. And it means that giving back this $2,000 to the middle-class families means they'll put it into the economy. They'll spend it in the economy. They'll use it as they see fit. However, I want to lay down a marker. As I've said about the jobs bill, it's important, Those, as I just mentioned, the roads and water and sewer and ports that need to be repaired and renovated and expanded, the schools that need to be built or expanded and repaired also, or the benefits to our small business community and the benefits to our middle-class working families, all important. But how we pay for it is also important, because we have to make sure it's paid for. But I want to say that I want to kind of put down the marker on at least the first proposal that was laid down regarding how the President was planning to pay for this. And let me first start with the oil and gas industry. Oil and gas industry for Alaska is about 85% of our economy in the sense of the money that goes into our state treasury, providing well over 40,000 jobs. Nationwide, the oil and gas industry produces over 9 million jobs, contributes over $2 trillion to our economy. I know some of my colleagues on my side of the aisle, I would say, that like to blast big oil, but as we know, the oil and gas industry is made up of hundreds, well over 500 companies of all sizes, small, medium-sized, large. Singling out a growing industry and imposing a tax penalty, in my view, is the wrong choice. It's the wrong road to go down. We need to recognize the potential for more job creation instead by supporting increased domestic oil and gas development. By developing the Alaska Arctic offshore resources alone, we can create over 50,000 jobs nationwide over the coming decades, jobs being created right here in our country. With 400 jobs as an example, just in Washington to upgrade the Kulik drilling unit, which will be utilized in Alaska, or the 1,000 jobs in Louisiana to build new Arctic supply ships right now. So when you look at what the potential is and when you look at the opportunities of the Arctic for oil and gas development, American jobs not only on the Arctic in Alaska, but also throughout the country, where many of the facilities that will be needed to construct or the material utilized will be built, as I mentioned, in Washington State and Louisiana. Also, the federal revenue that would be generated. The Chamber of Commerce has estimated that developing and increasing production on federal lands could produce well over $200 billion in new revenues to our country. An Alaska analysis puts the federal revenues just for the Beaufort and Chukchi Seas at $160 billion. And for those that aren't familiar where those are just above the North Slope in the Arctic. These have a potential of well over 24 billion barrels of oil development in the known technically recoverable reserves today, upwards to 24, 26 billion. Now, I will tell you that I do support, and I understand in the original proposal they wanted to take away some of these tax incentives that help our industry move forward, especially the smaller companies, expand exploration and development. And I recognize that tax reform needs to be done, and I'm a strong supporter of tax reform. When I look at Senator Wyden, Senator Coates, and myself, we've supported a piece of legislation that's all about tax reform. And I believe in a holistic proposal, not just selective industries. So don't get me wrong. Do I believe in tax reform? Do I believe in trying to clear out loopholes and incentives that aren't working or may be used improperly? Absolutely. And that's why, again, we supported a much broader perspective. But in the pay-fors or the tax proposals to pay for the jobs bill, this is not the right approach. Another concern I have is on aviation. Alaska has 6 times more pilots and 16 times more aircraft per capita than any state in the country. Alaska has limited road infrastructure. 80% of our communities are accessed not by roads, but by water or by air. So it's critical that we have the right kind of aviation system. General aviation is not a luxury in Alaska. It is a necessity. It is our roads in the highway, or highway in the sky. That's the utilization of our airlines and small planes. The general aviation component is critical for business, life safety, moving things from one village to another. One piece of the President's jobs bill would change the way the business can treat the depreciation of general aviation aircraft and create a disincentive to buy American-made aircraft and further depress the industry that has already felt a significant impact due to the recession. The administration and Congress should not be demonizing legitimate business travel. General aviation is more than just business jets that I know we like to read about and see in papers, and that's what people like to highlight. But in Alaska, it is about moving from one community to the other. This would impact the turboprop aircraft, which are the workhorse for the Alaska General Aviation fleet. Another administration proposal would impose a $100 per flight user fee on certain general aviation aircraft. This is not a wise or even cost-effective way to administer a tax. General aviation users pay their fair share now. They pay for the aviation system through a per-gallon tax on their aviation fuel. Matter of fact, the general aviation industry has even agreed to a modest increase in this fuel tax as part of the FAA, Federal Aviation Reauthorization Bill, which passed the Senate earlier this year. And it shows their commitment to pay their fair share, but in an efficient way, and also puts it back into aviation, which is what in our state is, again, as I said, the highway in the sky to move goods and people all across our state. Again, I think the idea the administration has of $100 per flight user fee is just another burden, another fee, another tax that is not necessary and very inefficient. Again, I want to move on to some additional as we think about job creation and what's going on. The other piece of this that I'm concerned about, the taxes that are associated with this idea, the jobs bill, which I support elements of it, as I mentioned, very important. But the issue when it comes to eliminating or limiting, I should say, the itemized deductions for charitable and mortgage interest deductions for families over $200,000. Again, I think this is not a well-founded idea. I recognize the administration is trying to find ways to pay for things, but this is not, in my view, a good idea or a smart move. When you think of a family, now some might say a family making $200,000 is wealthy. I would tell you if you have a couple kids in school and you're trying to figure out their future, and after you figure out the deductions, your health care costs, everything else, $200,000 disappears very quickly. And we need to ensure that limiting the deductions for these middle-class families continues. Not limiting them, but ensuring that deduction for mortgage interest, charitable contributions continues at the level that they can take a benefit from. So with those 3 or 4 items, I have concern with the way the pay-fors or the tax increases to pay for the jobs bill are being handled. Now, I know there's new discussion, and I'm glad there's new discussion, because it would be difficult for me to support any jobs bill with a pile of these new taxes or tax increases that are being proposed. This would not be in the interest of my constituents in Alaska, would not be in the interest of my industries that work hard in Alaska, creating jobs not only in our state but across this country. I agree that we need to do what we can to have a jobs bill, but let's have a fair pay for it in order to pay for it, not these additional taxes that I think would be a burden on working families, small businesses. Let me also, if I can just digress for one last second before I yield the floor back. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, it's always enjoyable. I read every business newspaper I can. I try to read every business magazine I can. I want to absorb as much information as we live in Washington here during the session and the work weeks, and then getting back home I hear from individuals. But it's amazing to me, and I know in the debate on the floor here we sit around and we have our philosophical debates. We saw some just a little bit ago on the old days versus the new days. I've never seen the old days. I've been here only 3 years, and, you know, this place hasn't run very well in the sense of trying to get things up and dealt with. But I will tell you some of the decisions I know, Mr. President, you have taken, I've taken, many on this side of the aisle have taken a lot of votes that have helped move this country forward. I'll tell you one specifically, which is about the auto industry. And I noticed as I was sitting here waiting for the debate, I was looking through these articles, and here's one yesterday from Wall Street, which I know is, you know, it's not your most liberal newspaper, to say the least. But if you recall, a couple of years ago, we made a decision that we were going to take some risk. We're going to try to move this country forward, save an industry that was struggling, that employed people in this country and was competing worldwide. Folks on the other side said we were going to create, a disaster by our actions. We would destroy the economy. We would sink this industry. The list went on and on, all the complaints. But as I read the headline in the Wall Street Journal from yesterday, and it reads, automakers now import jobs. Import jobs. What does this mean? This means they're bringing jobs back to this country. They specifically mentioned Japan and China. Now, 3 years ago, I could read you a different headline. Auto industry on their deathbed. Never going to survive. Maybe we'll only have one auto company left. We have now 3, and actually, the day before, you look at the numbers, Chrysler, 27% up over the previous year in sales. GM, 20% up. Ford, 9% up. The American auto industry is doing well because of what we did here. Now, some called it a bailout. I disagree. What we did was partner with the industry to help them get over the hump, the recession, the struggle. They're paying back every dime that the federal government loaned them, and they're profitable, they're hiring people, they're growing the industry, and they're bringing jobs back to this country. I'd say the policy we did, despite the naysayers, the negative attitudes people had on the other side, worked. Now, maybe the Wall Street Journal is wrong, but I don't think so, because I've seen article after article that states the same. I can point to many others. Now, is it as robust as we want in the economy? No. Can it do better? Absolutely. And that's why the jobs bill is important. Important for my state, important for every state. Investing in the issues that matter, water, roads, sewers, electrification, schools, you name it, putting money back into taxpayers' pockets instead of the IRS taking it and hoarding it, putting it back where it counts. That's what the jobs bill does. We have disagreements on how to pay for it. I think we're going to get to a better solution because several of us, more of the moderate wing of the Democrats, are arguing that we can't have these selective taxes the way they're laid out in the proposal presented by the President. We need to have a more simplified system and pay for it in a different way, but not penalize certain companies because maybe you don't like them or you have some, it creates a great headline, but let's focus on the right way to do this. I anticipate we will be able to have a different pay for, a different proposal on how to pay for a great potential to bring more jobs back. But I end on that note only because I want to make sure, I know we're going to hear more naysaying. But the bottom line is, the proof is in the pudding. That article I just read gives you that. Mr. President, I again want to thank you for the time and the opportunity to say a few words about the jobs bill, my concern, where I want to lay my marker down, but also about the success we've had on taking some votes that were tough votes and the success we've had to move this economy forward. Not as fast as we all would like, but better than I think the folks on the other side who just say no to everything. So let me end there, Mr. President. I'll yield the floor back and notice the absence of a quorum.